Hello and welcome to the Terran Space Academy, where we help prepare you for a bright future in the space industry. We have many more space scholars than we did a few years ago, and most of you will hear supposedly knowledgeable experts say that long-term survival in space is just not possible. As both a space scientist and physician, I assure you they are wrong. Others will argue that we must solve all our problems here on Earth before we look to the stars. I am also here to tell you today that they are wrong too. Not only is space exploration worth the effort and expense, it is absolutely vital to humanity's continued survival. To remind everyone of the importance of space exploration to all of us, I put this together. Let me know what you think. Why do so many of us look to the future? A huge amount of creative energy is spent by brilliant, talented people trying to convince others that space exploration is important. Why do we think that advances in technology are important? And why should the average person care about space? Futurists are those who imagine human civilization not as it is, but as it could be. To paraphrase Robert Kennedy, some look at the world and ask why. We look at the world and ask why not. Human beings are capable of incredible technological advances and incredible destruction. Governments will spend trillions of dollars to develop technologically beautiful machines, then use those machines to bomb cities. Most futurists are optimists. Even the angry astronaut, I suspect. But loving science and technology means you must, above all else, accept the truth. The truth is that there are over 7 billion people on this earth. If everyone lived to American standards, we would need the resources of at least 5 Earths. But we only have one. If we assume that life is a zero-sum competition, that the poor have less by choice alone, that those with more deserve to eventually have all, and those with less deserve to eventually have nothing, then this world will end one way. Human beings do not go quietly into the night. We have wars over football games. We riot at injustice. And our technology has made us capable of ending everything for everyone on this planet. There is not a nation on Earth that does not have blood on its hands. And there are no societies on Earth that cannot put everything aside for the future of their children. If you believe that everyone on this planet has the right to an equal chance of fulfilling their potential, to live in security, with opportunities and an unlimited future, then join us and look beyond this planet. Governments may not always make the right decisions, but visionaries can lead us into a better future. Those of us who are grown will have to dedicate ourselves to developing the technology and infrastructure necessary for the next generation to have this choice. Humans have put aside their differences in the past to defeat tyranny and accomplish great things. We must do so again. Some of us will die in this endeavor. From radiation, from the effects of low gravity, in accidents. There are always a million ways to die on a frontier. But if we persevere, we will build not just the cities on the Moon and Mars, but further out into the solar system. Even if the next several generations never develop the technology to go to another star system, we have more than enough resources in our solar system to sustain a population of hundreds of billions. And by moving some of us off the Earth, we will save the Earth itself. Then maybe our descendants will look to the stars and say, why not? Surviving radiation in space. When we think of radiation, we usually think of what we have experienced here on Earth. Radiation experienced on the surface of the Earth is usually due to the breakdown of unstable atoms. These atoms are unstable either because they are too big or they have too many neutrons compared to protons in the nuclei. To understand this, let's take a look at the simplest atom, hydrogen. Hydrogen, in its most basic form, has one proton and one electron. The atom is neutral because it has one proton with a positive charge and one electron with a negative charge. If we knock the electron off, it becomes an ion with a charge of +1, and therefore can be moved by electromagnetic fields. We saw how this is used in ion engines for space propulsion. Ionizing an atom by adding or subtracting an electron does not change the element. Now let us look at another type of hydrogen. This one has one proton and one neutron. Remember, the element's identity is determined by the number of protons in its nucleus. This is the atomic number. There's 1 for hydrogen, 2 for helium, 3 for lithium, and so on. When you add or subtract neutrons from a stable atom, it becomes an isotope. The most stable form of the element is most often found in nature, but heavier isotopes with more neutrons are found also, and sometimes those with fewer. What makes these atoms stable is if they have a balanced number of neutrons and protons. That number varies for every atom, but remember that protons, due to their positive electrical charge, will try to push each other apart. The neutrons have no electrical charge and do not feel this pressure. The quarks making up the neutrons and protons are attracted to each other by the strong nuclear force. Like gravity, this force is always attractive. The extra neutrons in a nucleus allows the strong force to help hold the nucleus together without adding any extra charge. The neutron is, as we have said, made of quarks, like all hadronic matter. If the nucleus is unstable, one quark can decay to another to make a more stable nucleus. This process is usually called beta decay. The isotopes of hydrogen with one proton and one neutron are very stable, and there are billions of tons of it in the oceans on Earth and elsewhere in the solar system. But if we add a third neutron to hydrogen, we then call the isotope tritium. This isotope is not stable. So if you have normal hydrogen and you add one neutron, it becomes deuterium. If you add 2 neutrons, it becomes tritium. And at 2 neutrons, it becomes unstable. One of the neutrons will decay into a proton and an electron. The electron is thrown from the atom with a characteristic velocity. This velocity gives the electron momentum and therefore energy. We measure the velocity of subatomic particles by this energy. It is a lot easier to measure the impact force of a particle than to try to measure its speed as it goes by. The total momentum of all the particles must be conserved, and depending on the movement and energies of the other particles, the velocity of the ejected particles can vary. For beta radiation, it is usually found to be around 1 million electron volts. Now, an electron volt is a measure of energy used for subatomic particles. If an electron, which, being charged, can feel electrical fields and jumped between 2 points that had a difference of 1 volt, it would hit with a specified momentum or energy. This is like dropping a mass of a specified weight from a specified height on Earth. If you drop 1 kilogram 1 meter, it will hit with a certain amount of energy anywhere on Earth. So if an electron moves from one place to another that has a differential between those places of 1 volt, it will hit with a certain amount of force. This has become the standard measure. Now, tritium, the isotope of hydrogen that has 2 neutrons, has twice as many neutrons as protons, and this is too many. One of the neutrons will decay into a proton and an electron and a tiny particle called a neutrino. These carry away the energy and drop down to a lower energy state. A gamma ray is often created in this process also. A gamma ray is an extremely high energy photon. The former tritium now has 2 protons and 1 neutron and is no longer an isotope of hydrogen that we call tritium. With 2 protons in the nucleus, it is now helium. Now, helium usually has 2 protons and 2 neutrons to be stable. The isotope made from tritium decay is called helium-3 because it only has 3 nucleons which are the two protons and the neutron, and it's exceedingly rare on Earth. It can, however, be found on the Moon, as it is generated by the fusion reaction of the Sun. This isotope of hydrogen has interest to space colonists as it can undergo a type of fusion called aneutronic fusion. Most fusion reactions give off a high-speed neutron. These neutrons are very deadly. Because they have no charge, they can penetrate deep into the body. When they hit something, their mass and speed causes a lot of damage. Neutron radiation damage is one of the deadliest types. We do not encounter these neutrons traveling through space very much because a free neutron is not stable and will decay into a proton and electron in a little more than 10 minutes. These high-speed deadly neutrons can be created, however, by other types of radiation striking the materials in your ship. We will get to that on the course on radiation shielding. A lot of the radiation on Earth is caused by the decay of unstable atoms. These atoms usually have too many neutrons compared to protons, and either a neutron decays into a proton and also giving off an electron. This is what we call beta decay. Or an entire helium nucleus is expelled. This is called alpha decay. In this case, the nucleus of helium would have 2 protons and 2 neutrons. In both cases, a gamma ray is also generated. Alpha particles are just high-speed helium atoms. Almost always the energy of their creation strips away their electrons and they have a positive charge. They are called alpha and beta because alpha decay was discovered first. And remember that beta particles also include antimatter. The antimatter equivalent of an electron is a positron. Positrons are emitted in the decay of some isotopes, and this is used in medicine in something called positron emission tomography to look for cancer and other diseases. Positrons traveling through space are still called beta particles. In space, there are several sources of radiation other than radioactive decay. High-speed protons and electrons are generated by every star. Our sun puts out a solar wind of these types of radiation along with some helium nuclei also. These travel out from the sun and strike the Earth. Most of this radiation is stopped by Earth's thick atmosphere. Earth is also protected by a strong magnetic field, generated by the spinning of the Earth's molten iron core. The Moon does not have a spinning molten core. It has cooled and hardened, and is outside the Earth's magnetic force field. Radiation levels on the surface of the Moon can be 150 times that on the surface of the Earth. The average radiation dose on Earth is 2.4 millisieverts per year. Millisievert is a standardized measure of the effective radiation on a human body. On the Moon, this radiation dose varies from 110 millisieverts to 380 millisieverts depending on solar activity. Now, surprisingly, the solar wind shields the Moon from radiation coming from outside the solar system. So radiation on the Moon is higher at solar minimum and lower at solar maximum. The solar wind also adds energy to Earth's magnetic shield, helping to protect us. The Earth's magnetic field traps some high-energy particles from the Sun, and sometimes elsewhere, creating a layer of mostly electrons and protons and 2 separate layers around the Earth. Being in these bands can expose a space traveler to a lot more radiation than being just a little higher or lower in altitude. These bands of radiation are called the Van Allen belts, after the man who discovered them. And the Apollo astronauts had to go through these at one of its weaker points, at very high speed to prevent getting too much radiation exposure. Jupiter also has an electromagnetic field, and it is enormous and extremely powerful. It generates an extreme radiation hazard to any spacecraft or human venturing near the inner moons. Now, Callisto is outside much of this field, and is a safer colony site than Europa or Io. Any high-speed atom with more than 1 proton is called a Z particle. Z is the symbol for atomic number. The Sun can put out hydrogen, which is not a Z particle, and helium, which is. It can also put out lithium, oxygen, other heavier elements that it had absorbed after these elements were created in a supernova. Lithium has atomic number 3 and is the 3rd lightest element in the periodic table. Now, the Sun also emits X-rays and gamma rays, but these are not particles in the way we normally think of them. They do not have a rest mass. These are photons, packets of energy with no rest mass. Events outside of our solar system are much more dramatic. Stars can explode as supernovas. Black holes can absorb massive stars and radiate incredible amounts of energy, accelerating and flinging out very heavy atomic nuclei. Iron, thorium, uranium, gold, platinum, and other heavy elements can all come flying through space and impact you or your spaceship. They will also be a great danger on the surface of Mars, as it has also cooled and lost its magnetic field protection. The solar wind has now stripped away almost all of the Martian atmosphere. At one time, Mars had lakes on its surface and a thick atmosphere. Due to its smaller size and having cooled, it has lost these. The atmosphere on Mars is about 1% that of the Earth. Colonists there will be exposed to much higher radiation levels than on Earth. Scientists have found that extremely low-frequency radio waves might be able to help reinforce a magnetic field and could possibly be used to strengthen a planet's magnetic shielding, and this might be an option in the future, or generate a strong local magnetic field around just the colony itself. We'll cover more of this in the course on radiation shielding. Colonists on Titan will be protected by its thick atmosphere. Now remember, not every electron is considered a beta particle. And the antimatter equivalent of an electron, the positron, is also called a beta particle, even though it annihilates with normal matter, and getting hit by an antiparticle should be much worse than getting hit by normal matter, though one positron hitting you does not cause a significant amount of injury. A beta particle with 0.5 million electron volts of energy can go about 1 meter through normal air. Tritium produced beta particles at 5.6 kiloelectron volts, while phosphorus-32 creates them at 695 kiloelectron volts. Now, alpha particles, which are high-speed helium nuclei, are always above 4,000 kiloelectron volts because of their much greater mass. So that makes them 4 megaelectron volts. A bowling ball hitting you at 20 kilometers per hour will hurt a lot more than a ping pong ball at 100 kilometers per hour. Radiation in space can consist of electrons and protons traveling at extremely high to much lower speeds. The solar wind is about 400 kilometers per second on average from the sun's equator and up to 750 kilometers per second at the poles. This produces an energy for particles coming from the sun in the ecliptic of about 500 electron volts to 10,000 electron volts, so 0.5 to 10 kiloelectron volts. These energies are lower than most of the energies produced by radioactive decay. The energy of particles coming from elsewhere in the galaxy are created by massive events that do not occur in our solar system. Neutron stars colliding, stars going supernova, or black holes tearing stars apart. These particles, called galactic radiation, are streaming in all directions in space. The average flux, scientists use the term flux to describe a flow of particles or energy, of galactic radiation is about 4 protons per square centimeter per second. It takes about 11.2 million electron volts to break apart the nucleus of an iron atom. Cosmic rays or galactic radiation can have thousands of times more energy than this and is often measured in gigaelectron volts. Cosmic rays and galactic radiation are pretty much interchangeable terms. The sun and extrasolar events also produce a lot of photons. Photonic radiation includes visible light, radio waves, microwaves, ultraviolet, X-rays, and gamma rays. Radio waves are not much of a concern to you, but could interfere with your electronics and communications. As the Apollo astronauts orbited to the far side of the moon for the first time, they heard haunting sounds playing through their radios. These transmissions were coming from Jupiter, and with the Earth's radio waves being blocked by the moon, they were picked up by the Apollo instruments. Our sun makes a lot of radio waves also. These radio transmissions from Jupiter did not come from intelligent life, but from the powerful electromagnetic field around Jupiter. As charged particles are trapped in this field and their course curve, they give off radiation, like the northern lights on Earth. Some of this radiation is visible, but some of it is in radio waves. The astronauts were listening to Radio Jupiter. While radio waves are benign, other types of radiation are not. Visible light from the sun can blind you if you do not have a shaded visor. Ultraviolet can give you sunburns on Earth and can cause your suit to degrade in open space as well as other materials on your ship. This also occurs on the moon and even on Mars. The atmosphere of Mars is thin, and it has no ozone layer to block the ultraviolet rays like the Earth has. X-rays and gamma rays can penetrate through many materials and cause damage to human cells. We will cover this in the space medicine course. Now that you understand what radiation is, watch for the courses on radiation shielding and space medicine. So to summarize, during your space operations, you will need to be aware of the radiation dangers. Photonic radiation is light emitted by the sun and elsewhere in the galaxy. It can cause damage from visible light blindness to persons or sensors, from ultraviolet light damaging skin and materials such as suits and habitats, and X-rays and gamma rays. They can penetrate suits, ships, and bodies, causing damage to cells and electronics. Particle radiation includes the electrons, protons, and heavier elements in the solar wind, and galactic radiation, that are the greatest risks to space travelers. These must be adequately shielded against if we are to live healthy lives in our space colonies and during travel in space. Muscle building and maintenance for space explorers and colonists. There used to be other intelligent hominids on this planet. These cousins of humanity had bigger brains than we do, and they were physically stronger than us in every way. Some of them had 3 times our muscle mass and more than double our bone density. But these branches of the evolutionary tree came to an end, and we alone survived. Why? What did we have that they did not? The evidence seems clear that modern humans have gone through at least one, but possibly 2 bottlenecks in the not-too-distant past. About 70,000 years ago, the facts indicate that something wiped out most of the modern human species and set the others on a road to extinction. Only a few thousand humans survived. What did we have that our stronger cousins did not? I think there was a mass starvation event. The Toba volcano had a massive eruption around that time. It could have darkened the skies for more than a year, causing an instant ice age, killing plants and animals everywhere on Earth. We like to say survival of the fittest, but this is not accurate in its common meaning. Natural selection does not always choose the strongest or the fastest or even the smartest. The organism with the minimum traits necessary to survive will survive and propagate. All those muscles and bone mass and those massive brains took a lot of calories to fuel. I believe that these ancestors, who faded into the night, had a much lower level of a hormone called myostatin than do modern humans. Myostatin is a hormone that causes human muscles to go away. That is a strange thing for an organism to have. Tigers don't have muscles that go away. You never see a grizzly bear in the gym, but they are stronger than any human could dream of being. In fact, the little chimpanzees you see in the zoo are 7 times stronger than an average adult human male. Roll that around your brain a little. Humans, though possessed of great endurance, have the weakest muscles, kilogram for kilogram, than just about any other species on Earth. What possible benefit could there be for a species to hardly be able to fight their way out of a paper bag? Simple. We can survive indefinitely on only 40% of our usual caloric intake, and there is some evidence that this type of calorie restriction diet can actually extend our lives. We seem to go into a famine mode, where we break down unnecessary muscles, lower our metabolism, and possibly extend our lifespan during times of low food availability. The reason almost all modern humans have to constantly exercise to keep our muscle and avoid fat is because those genes are responsible for our ancestors' survival. One of the problems is we don't have a deficit of calories now. Our advances in agricultural technology allow us to have much more than we need to be healthy. The question is, what will happen to space explorers who go into space for long periods of time in zero or low gravity? These explorers will be the least exercised humans in the world. Not even gravity to give their hearts something to do. Fluid that normally stays in the legs is under pressure from the muscles around arteries to keep blood from pooling in our legs when we stand or run. These systems continue operating in low gravity, causing fluid to build up in the upper body and head. This extra fluid can cause headaches, nausea, increased intracranial pressure, and pressure in the eyes, damaging vision. In fact, I believe SpaceX should start recruiting veterans and other qualified candidates who have suffered double leg amputations to crew the Starship on its way to Mars. These men and women would be ideally suited for zero-gravity environments, as upper body strength does not deteriorate as fast as lower body strength does in zero gravity. They would have lower caloric demands, and since there should be handholds to brachiate on a ship, legs would just get in the way anyway. This would be a wonderful opportunity for many very qualified and intelligent candidates. For everyone else, we need to get really good at resistance training. I have always thought that pressure cylinders should be used in space for exercise. The pressure could be built up and used to power a small generator, creating an energy credit. In an emergency, the batteries for the life support systems and emergency communications could be powered manually if a catastrophe took out the other power systems. So what is the best way to keep muscles strong? Resistance training. nothing beats lifting weights and pushing a muscle to its limits. To avoid injury, there should only be incremental changes in the mass lifted. Never try to see how much you can lift. You can easily strain or tear a muscle or tendon. Work every muscle group at least every 3 days. Start with compound exercises. Deadlifts and overhead press with low to moderate weight are good. You can also do squats with low to medium weight, but never try to work your legs to their limit with squats. Use a leg press or leg extension. Your back can never survive the amount of weight it would take to adequately work your legs. Then go to muscle isolation exercises like biceps, triceps, etc. Diet is the next important factor in maintaining muscle mass and overall health. If your diet is low in protein, you will start to catabolize your muscles to make other proteins. This means they will break down. Many of my friends have suggested that everyone will, by necessity, be vegan on the moon and Mars. I do not believe this is the best idea. In fact, with limited food resources, it is imperative that we develop micro-ecosystems. There will be a course coming up on food selection and production in space, but suffice it to say that insects, chicken eggs, and fish will be a big part of it. Let's just say that the quality of protein intake can have a huge effect on muscle retention. So we have hard exercise and good nutrition. What else can we do? It turns out we can suppress the myostatin production of the body. We can give an antibody to block myostatin, and in mice, this causes a rapid 20% increase in muscle mass. These antibodies could be given on long-duration, low-gravity missions to prevent muscle loss. Some, like Stremulilab, are artificial antibodies that block myostatin and have the same effect. Others, like ACVR2B, are not antibodies. They mimic a natural binding protein of myostatin and bind it out of the bloodstream. Care must be taken because when you put on muscle mass without the usual resistance training, the tendons have not been strengthened and injury risk increases. Yoga, stretching, and isometric exercises will need to be a big part of this treatment. Follistatin is a protein that naturally blocks the effects of myostatin, but it also blocks some other active hormones that may have other long-term effects. The direct inhibition of myostatin seems to work well with few side effects, and scientists have found a way to genetically modify yeast to produce a myostatin antigen that stimulates your natural antibodies like a vaccine. Taking this as an oral pill would usually cause a permanent reduction in your myostatin levels and increase muscle mass and prevent low-gravity wasting. People in the future may be genetically engineered to produce lower levels of myostatin so they stay naturally strong. Just make sure the food supply is good. All those extra muscles require extra calories. Without myostatin, the body's famine response is suppressed, and people will starve faster. We don't want to go the way of our stronger ancestors.
How space affects bone health. Bones are often thought of as almost non-living structures. After all, when someone dies and decays, all that is left is usually their bones. But the skeletal system is actually a complex organ of the body. Bones serve several functions. The long bones in the legs and arms and also in the sternum contain bone marrow stem cells that make our blood and immune cells. We'll cover these in space medicine radiation training. Bones have a crystal matrix called hydroxyapatite. These crystals of hydroxyapatite are embedded within a flexible protein network of collagen. Collagen is one of the main support proteins of the body. It is found in every organ and is a leather-like material that provides strength and flexibility to tissue. In fact, most of leather is this material from an animal's skin. Think of collagen as nature's carbon fiber, strong and flexible with limited elasticity. That brings us to the next protein, elastin. Elastin is the spandex of the body. It allows our tissues to stretch. Parts of the body that must stretch and return to their original shape, like muscles, have more elastin than tissues that are not supposed to stretch as much, like bone. The collagen is formed into a fibril, about half a micrometer in diameter, that are bundled into fibers. These fibers will have channels through them, called the Haversian canals, and nerve fibers. The Haversian canals contain blood vessels to bring nutrients and remove toxins, and the nerve fibers to allow innervation so our body can feel bone stress and injury. Bones have a complicated structure. They will have a clear plastic-like sheath called periosteum, which does have quite a bit of elastin, then a solid layer of bone called the cortex. Most bones have a partially hollow interior to save weight, with support structures called trabeculations crisscrossing them. Remember, bones have a network of tunnels in them to allow access to blood vessels and nerves. The canals will sometimes be cross-connected by something called Volkmann's canals. Around the Haversian canal there will be active bone cells, fibroblasts making collagen, and osteocytes, cells that maintain the bone structure. Osteocytes and other cells form a circular cylinder, kind of a bone functional unit. We'll call an osteon. Bone is a highly active organ. It is constantly being broken down and built back up. The cells that do this are osteocytes, and they come in two types. Osteoclasts break down bone structure for reabsorption, and osteoblasts build bone structure back up. The body is constantly trying to get rid of extra bone mass. If bone mass is unnecessarily heavy, it restricts movement. The osteoclasts are constantly removing any bone that does not seem necessary to support recent stress patterns. If this goes too far, you can get osteopenia, which is thin bones. Then as it progresses, osteoporosis, which is weak bone. This makes you more prone to fracture. The osteoblasts build up bone and add extra wherever stress patterns indicate a need. They can put on too much bone in some conditions. When an adult has a fracture of a bone, it usually heals thicker than the original bone, showing up on x-rays forever. The extremes of this cause a condition called hyperostosis, where bones get abnormally thick, or even worse, fibrodysplasia ossificans progressiva, where the osteoblasts start mineralizing all the collagen in your tissues. Eventually you cannot move and become like a statue. Leontiasis ossea causes the facial bones to thicken abnormally and is a terrible malady to suffer, often caused by Piaget's disease, which is a hyperactive parathyroid hormone syndrome. On the other hand, if bone structure gets too weak from undermineralization, like in Piaget's disease or vitamin D deficiency, if the bone becomes too brittle, it will fracture, like in osteoporosis. A lot of elderly people develop this disease as they age, especially small women. What keeps bones healthy, and what causes these terrible maladies? To keep bones healthy, we start with genetics. Inherited conditions or predispositions cause some bone problems. Osteoporosis is a normal consequence of aging. The aging bone cells do not replace the bone material as efficiently, and the bones get weak. Men have, on average, a thicker, heavier bone structure than women. This means that elderly men suffer less osteoporosis than do women. Men are also heavier on average. A man's bone gets a better workout supporting the extra mass. This sends signals to the bone to strengthen. Active, heavier women suffer less bone loss than inactive or lighter women. Osteopenia is what we call a condition where bone mass is lost but has not reached the level of osteoporosis. Spaceflight osteopenia has been studied in space medicine extensively because, in zero or low gravity, without stress being placed on the bones, they start to be reabsorbed by the body. This starts to happen very quickly. Calcium is one of the main elements of the bone crystal matrix, hydroxyapatite. Calcium levels start to rise within just 24 hours of someone being bedridden or in a low-gravity environment. This reabsorption of bone and production of calcium into the blood can be offset by weight-bearing exercise, but not completely. Apollo 11 had a duration of about a week from July 16 to July 24. Most of that time was spent in low gravity, either in space or on the moon. The moon has 1/6 normal Earth gravity, but many people forget that the spacesuit worn outside the ship weighed 180 pounds. All the astronauts had to be no more than 5 foot 7 inches tall and weigh no more than 180 pounds, which is about 207 centimeters and 70 kilograms. This means that the suit weighed as much as they did, and added to their personal weight, which would have been about 30 pounds on the moon, increased their effective mass to 60 pounds. This added mass gave them a better workout. These were all also carefully selected, exceptionally fit and healthy men. Bone loss in space has been measured at 1 to 2% per month for astronauts on the Mir space station. Compare this to 1 to 1.5% per year in the elderly, and 2 to 3% total for women after menopause. It turns out that hormones have a large effect on our bone health. Calcitonin is a hormone that adds bone mass, while parathyroid hormone signals reabsorption. Vitamin D is necessary for strong bones and helps calcium crystallize and strengthen bone. A lack of vitamin D can cause bone weakening and growth abnormality. Colonists on the moon, Mars, or in an orbital habitat will not be sunbathing. You would burn instantly, and going outside without a pressure suit would be bad. Vitamin D supplements will be necessary. The data from the Russian Mir space station is one reason why there is so much exercise equipment on the International Space Station. There's a treadmill, a stationary bike, and a resistance or weight machine on the ISS to strengthen muscle and bone. A heavy spacesuit on the Moon or Mars would be a good thing. In fact, a layer of water-soaked sponge, just 2.5 centimeters thick, would help with radiation shielding and add considerable mass. An astronaut who is 5 foot 10 inches and 190 pounds on Earth would have a body surface area of about 2 square meters. If 1.5 square meters were protected by the water shield at a thickness of 2.5 centimeters, that would give a volume of about 0.0375 cubic meters, or about 37.5 kilograms of water, easily carried on Mars or the Moon. That would be in addition to the air tanks, pressure tanks, climate control systems, helmet, and everything else you need to be in a low-pressure environment. There are some medications that are used now to prevent bone loss on Earth. This includes hormone therapy, cell receptor modulators, osteoporosis medications called bisphosphonates, like alendronate or abandonate, and teriparatide, which is a form of parathyroid hormone that stimulates bone thickening. Biphosphates block osteoclasts from reabsorbing bone, slowing down this process. Teriparatide stimulates osteoblasts, encouraging them to build more bone. In the absence of normal gravity stress, however, this bone may be deposited where it is not needed and lead to some of the abnormal bone thickening conditions we saw earlier. Bone loss has other effects on the body. As the calcium is sent from the bone to the bloodstream, blood levels rise. This can cause a condition known as hypercalcemia, or too much calcium in the blood. Having too much calcium in the blood can cause kidney stones to form and affect heart function, sometimes causing arrhythmia. A kidney stone is one of the most painful things for a person to suffer and would completely incapacitate the strongest astronaut. Heart arrhythmias can lead to death. To solve all these problems, you need one simple thing: artificial gravity. To maintain bone health in transit and to keep people healthy on the colonies, you will need to use centrifugal force to create artificial gravity. This is often ignored by government and private space organizations, but there is no other safe way to colonize space. Please review the course titled Understanding Artificial Gravity. The medications and exercise alone will not be enough for the average person. You can send a carefully selected exploration crew to establish the colony in a ship without artificial gravity, then send a construction crew to build the infrastructure to allow radiation shielding and artificial gravity for the general colonists to come. Call these early colonists the founders and build statues. They will be sacrificing their health and years of their life to expand humanity into space.
Understanding artificial gravity. There are two things that will make it impossible to colonize space if they are not properly dealt with: cosmic radiation and low gravity. Every viable colonization site being considered right now, Mars, the Moon, Titan, Ceres, is a place where the natural gravity is much lower than Earth normal. The gravity on Earth is measured as an acceleration toward the center of the planet. The Earth has a radius of 6,371 kilometers. The average force of gravity on Earth's surface is 9.8 meters per second squared. This means that you will feel a force pushing you down on the Earth as if you were in a spaceship in empty space and the ship was accelerating at 9.8 meters per second squared. This acceleration means that at the end of the first second, your ship is traveling 9.8 meters per second. At the end of the next second, the ship is traveling 19.6 meters per second. After the third second, it will be going 29.4 meters per second. It is this acceleration that gives you the exact feeling of gravity on Earth. Simply going fast in space does not produce a gravity effect. Changes in velocity, acceleration, or deceleration produces this effect. The Expanse uses constant thrust to show normal gravity on their ships during spaceflight. Though this is a much more practical method of producing a gravity effect than gravity generators on Star Trek, or just ignoring the problem like most shows, in the Expanse they have an Epstein drive, something we do not have. So we'll have to find another way. The astronauts and cosmonauts on the International Space Station live in freefall, feeling no gravitational force. This does not mean there is no gravity at the altitude it orbits, which is about 320 kilometers. The gravity there is almost the same as the surface of the Earth, but they are moving horizontally at a tremendous speed. This causes them to fall in an arced path. This path happens to be the same arc as the curvature of the Earth, so they constantly fall around the Earth without ever hitting it. Living in zero-G is very bad for you. You very quickly suffer significant bone loss, muscle loss, and fluid redistribution. Your heart gets weak, and at times your blood actually flows backwards through some veins. Your head fills with fluid, increasing the pressure on your eyes and causing vision problems. These effects are not all resolved with exercise and resistance training. Many astronauts are incapacitated for several days on arriving to the space station because of nausea, vomiting, and other vestibulocochlear effects. The only way for humans to safely colonize space is to have artificial gravity. The best way to produce artificial gravity with modern technology is using centrifugal force. When an object is spinning, a force will be generated moving out from the center of spin. This force is centrifugal force. To keep things from flying away, they must be held back by an opposing force. This is the centripetal force. The centripetal force is felt by the structure of your ship. It is like hanging on to a rapidly spinning merry-go-round. The centrifugal force is what you feel trying to pull you off. The centripetal force is your arms pulling in the opposite direction. So on a spinning space station, the colonists walk on the inside wall of the station, feeling a force pressing them to it. This again is the centrifugal force. The cables and spokes of the station will exert a force toward the center, counteracting the outward force. Again, this is the centripetal force. If the station spun too fast, it could tear the spokes apart and everything would go flying out. This type of artificial gravity was first described by a brilliant self-taught scientist in Russia named Konstantin Tsiolkovsky. He solved the rocket equation that allows us to plan all spaceflight and worked out the principle of a rotating station producing artificial gravity. Wernher von Braun brought this concept to the attention of NASA and the world with Walt Disney when they developed the concept and created models representing the station. This is often called the von Braun station, but in all fairness, they should be known as Tsiolkovsky stations. A large rotating space colony could have many shapes, from the spinning wheel design to a rotating cylinder. This was depicted very well in the television show Babylon 5. When you are designing an artificial gravity system, the two most important questions are, how big can I make it, and how many rotations per minute can my colonists stand? The smaller the radius, the faster your ship must spin. To make a SpaceX Starship have normal Earth gravity of 1 g on the inside of its hull when spinning on its long axis, you would have to spin it at 14 RPM. This is pretty fast. The steel construction should not have a problem with it, but the passengers might. We must differentiate between the highly trained astronauts who are tested and excluded if they experience too much motion sickness, and the average colonist, who probably gets seasick. If we install inflatable habitats and extend them from the Starship, say we use TransHab, the upright inflatable habitat designed and abandoned by NASA and later purchased by Bigelow Aerospace. These were 11 meters tall. If we put the living quarters at the bottom of these, we would get a radius from the center of the ship at 15.5 meters. At 15.5 meters, we get 1 g at 7.6 RPM. Our colonists may be able to tolerate this, but it would be unlikely. There would be a significant Coriolis effect, meaning the spin at your feet would be different than the spin at your head. Any rapid head movements would almost certainly cause severe nausea. Children are still accommodating to their environment and may adjust perfectly to the spin effect, but then feel extreme motion sickness on planets. It would be best to keep the spin at about 2 RPM. This is unnoticeable to almost everyone. This would give a radius of about 223 meters if you wanted to generate 1 Earth gravity. This is a big space station. It would have a circumference of 1,400 meters, or 1.4 kilometers. But could we get by with less gravity? If our colonists were going to Mars on their TransHab-equipped Starship, we could adjust them to Martian gravity on the way. Mars gravity is 3.71 meters per second squared, which is 38% that of Earth. To produce this much gravity, the Starship would only have to be rotated at 4.7 RPM. This would be easily manageable to adult colonists going to build the infrastructure for the general colonists to come later. By the time you are transporting children, you need a true Aldrin cycler with a radius of at least 233 meters and spinning at 2 RPM, giving 1 g. During the 8th-month flight, you could slowly adjust the rotation speed while everyone is sleeping, so it slowly goes down to 1.2 RPM. This would give a centrifugal acceleration of 3.71 meters per second squared, which is Mars gravity, adjusting everyone to the lower gravity en route. So if you want artificial gravity on a ship, you're going to have a big ship. Any gravity at all would probably help tremendously, as blood pools in the head and even flows backwards in zero gravity. This is not healthy. The SpaceX Starship could generate Martian gravity at a reasonable RPM for adult astronauts. A large rotating ship will be needed for children. In summary, the only practical way to generate artificial gravity with current technology is by rotating your ship or colony. The larger the radius, the slower it can spin to generate a specific gravitational force. Astronauts and carefully selected colonists could withstand high RPMs, maybe as much as 14 RPM, without serious consequences, so they could get by with a smaller ship. The general adult population probably cannot withstand more than 4 RPM without significant distress. Children should not be subjected to more than 2 RPM, as it could impair the development of their vestibulocochlear system. Any gravity is better than no gravity, and the medical consequences of zero gravity are severe. But the question of low gravity accommodation does not end with the voyage. We also must consider what will be done when the person arrives at the moon or Mars or on an asteroid. It will be necessary for people to live on high-speed train habitat to allow proper childhood development. No one knows if it's safe to raise children in lunar or Martian gravity. It would be completely unethical to subject children to this without finding out. Pregnant women and children up to the age of perhaps 18 or 20 would need to live on an artificial gravity producing train with a radius of about 1 kilometer. This train could then go around at about 1 RPM, producing 1 G of normal Earth gravity. All the colonists could live on this train, boarding and unboarding using a parallel track that catches up to, docks with, and then undocks from the train. They would work on the Martian or lunar surface and then come back to their artificial gravity train for the rest of their day and night. This would allow cardiovascular, muscle, and bone reconditioning and should vastly extend how long people can safely live and work in a low-gravity environment.
Mental fitness. It is a fact that the human mind is a program running on the hardware of the brain. But unlike most hardware, the brain will adapt itself to whatever reasonable load is demanded of it. And the brain is just like the rest of the body in some ways. Just 6 weeks of mindfulness meditation can cause changes in the cortex of the executive areas of the brain, visible to a high-resolution MRI. Just like challenging daily exercise, providing good building materials, and following a healthy lifestyle will result in your body getting stronger and better able to function. The brain will do the same. Plan your exercise for your mind just as you should your body. Start by focusing on your weakest areas. What we do not use rapidly atrophies. This applies to the brain also. If you hate math, get a high school algebra workbook and do a few sets a day. Increase the weight to calculus as algebra gets easy. You will soon find that this is no longer your weakness. The human brain usually processes mathematics and equations in an area of the left cerebral hemisphere called the angular gyrus. This area will develop a thicker cortex with mental exercise in this subject. You can change your mind and body over time. You have a limited amount of time to get everything done throughout the day. Break your day up into blocks and plan ahead. Plan your study time, work time, and rest time. They are equally important to your mental and physical health. To stay up to date, I do not recommend watching the news on television. I suggest you find a good condensed news source. NPR's Up First is available by podcast. It is a brief, up-to-date summary of the latest news. Start your day with some calisthenics or stretches and catch up on current events. Hit the gym for resistance training no more than 40 minutes a day, 3 times a week. If your workout takes more than 40 minutes, you're either very advanced or going way too slow. Intensity is more important than duration in this regard. Meditate at least 3 minutes every morning or evening or both. Every other day, get in some intense cardio. Don't jog for an hour. That's not good for your knees. Sprint for 60 seconds, then walk for 10 minutes, and repeat twice more. An intense 30-minute routine like this on the days in between resistance training is better for you than long-duration exercise. Bike instead of running if you have bad knees. Then get done whatever it is you do to provide for yourself and your family. When at work, focus completely on work. When work is done for the day, put it out of your mind and focus on yourself and those you care about. Keep 1 hour of study every day for yourself. During this hour, you can watch videos that help you catch up on the advances in technology for the space industry. There are hundreds of YouTube channels to choose from, but to get the most information out of your time, I suggest these two. To the Future with Xishuan and Sebastian is made by two very smart people. They both have advanced degrees and know what they are talking about. They are very entertaining and cover all technology updates and advances relevant to the high-tech and space industries. Then consider The Angry Astronaut. He's a lot of fun to watch and will do a deeper dive into some subjects related solely to space. To research particular subjects, I suggest seeing if The Angry Astronaut or The Everyday Astronaut or Scott Manley have done something on it. These three are very good at explaining aerospace concepts. Now, don't buy every text available, but to understand rockets, you will need a copy of this book. This is the Bible of spaceflight. Rocket Propulsion Elements. It has been updated over the last several decades, with the latest edition coming out in 2016. It is a college textbook, but take it a piece at a time as you study. It is surprisingly readable. Much of it will go over your head. Work what you can, study to be able to do more with what you can't, and eventually it will all be clear. If you understood everything in a text the first time you read it, then you wasted your money.
Thanks for watching, and stay safe at Astra Pro Terra.